Hey everyone, it's Aesah, and welcome to my video on full 14.24b meta update. The patch has been out for a little while now, but it's still going to be around for a couple more weeks until January 15th, and I'm joined by Rainplosion. So
Hello.
yeah, we've been obviously pretty familiar with this patch. We played it competing in Macau, uh, and it's getting pretty well optimized, and a lot has changed since the start, so I want to do another update for it. So we want to talk about the pretty much like the top comps, the top lines you should play for, and basically we think the top three are Sentinel Academy, Black Rose, Soko, and then Emissaries. So let's go ahead and start with the Sentinel Academy board.
Well, I'm not certain that it's the board that like necessarily caps the highest or is always the strongest. It's pretty flexible in terms of itemization. As long as you can make use of like at least some of the academy items. You can play AD or AP. It lets you slam more flexible items early game if you're leaning towards it, and you can play it from a variety of setups like extra Sentinel plus ones or Academy plus ones. Or just like Lux item holder early game or a Sentinel frontline early game. To note, I think that the Academy opener, which Asa is showing right now, is incredibly strong in the early game. The power of plus one item, like it has happened in the past sets for like all plus one item traits, like Super Fan or whatever, is always really strong in the early game. So if you can get three Academy in the early game, it really helps you streak and maintain tempo.
Yep. Um, Sounds good. One reason I really like this comp is you can use AD and AP items. Uh, Definitely plan ahead with your Academy items. I actually recently released an Academy Sentinel guide, so definitely check that out. But yeah, you can plan ahead with your Academy items. If you know for sure you're getting like a mana item, then you can go for like two AP items on Heimer, and same for like AD items as well. But eventually, you will default into four Sentinels, and then Academy backline. You can play Corki, which will get fit really well. Artillerist. Once you get Rumble, you'll get Scrap as well. So something like this, and you can go AD or AP items. It doesn't have to be exactly this, depending on what you hit. Uh, you could go like six Sentinel. If you have Jace, of course, you could go five Academy here.
Yeah, it
Uh,
really depends on your roll down, and
yeah,
a lot of it depends on the legendaries. You can also drop units if you need for like if you hit a Victor or Mel. Those units often tend to be quite good, and Mel can take over Heimerdinger items.
yeah. If you don't need like the extra Academy item, you can definitely drop Lux. You'll lose one item, but it just depends how much value you're getting out of it. But yeah, I really like this comp because you can go AD or AP, and as Rain mentioned, I think the opener for it, anytime like you have Lux plus Sentinels, you can definitely like kind of naturally build into it. You could just open with something like this, for example.
Yeah,
Uh,
if you have like out of the Academy, you really just look to be taking Ezreal's off carousel. Even the weakest of Academy items still give Lux like some armor and or some damage amp, or your frontline some HP. So and just the power of plus one item in the early game, no matter how little it suits your comp, is just insane and worth much more than other three traits.
yeah. Okay. We have a lot of comps to talk about, so let's probably go through the rest of them maybe a little bit faster.
Oh yeah.
The next one is probably like Black Rose Soko. I honestly think like opener wise, it can be pretty similar. I think it's a little easier to go into it with Watchers, but it's best with Sorcerer opener again. It can be Visionary with like Morgana plus Vex or something, but Sorcerers just tend to be stronger in the early game. Uh, Watcher is better because then you can go Vlad, and then if you do manage to find like Darius and Swain, you could get extra econ from Conquer. Like this is probably gonna be your strongest mid game board, especially if you have Nami. And then this kind of like can naturally transition into Black Rose. You can even keep Swain, who will give Form Swapper to Elise. But yeah, eventually you'll want to be playing around Elise, Cassio, and then Dominators. A lot of times it's going to be four Dominator. It will just give you like a really good mix of frontline and damage. Ziggs is really strong if you find Ziggs and like if you find Ziggs and another Dominator early, especially if you upgrade him, that's going to be a really strong mid game.
Yeah, and to be clear, if you can't hit your Silco 2 or your other frontline upgrades, a lot of these low-cost dominators serve very well for a long time. While they aren't, I don't think they're actually better than the 4 cost. Ziggs and Blitzcrank can put out comparable amounts of damage and tankiness to Mundo and Silco. So you can look to itemize them as your dual carry slash tank, or just or item pull them for a very long time until you've upgraded your primary carries.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't put in Mundo and of course Mordekaiser. You're gonna want these units if you haven't like Mundo 2, obviously. But Mundo 1 is gonna be like weaker than Blitz 2. Kind of the same thing in the backline, like Ziggs 2 is generally preferable to Soko, but of course once you find Soko 2, you can oh,
Yeah.
drop these units. So I guess eventually you'll want to be playing these. This is only 6 units, so your level 8 board. A lot of times you can fit Form Swapper is good. Like Swain will give you 2 traits. Garen will give you just like more frontline. Dominator scale into the fight, so just frontline is very valuable. You can always go up in Black Rose as well. If you find LeBlanc, Jace, Mordekaiser, they can all like fit very well into this comp.
To that note, it's commonly seen, at least in high elo, that people prefer to itemize Garen over even Mundo, despite the
Yeah,
fact that Mundo has 4 Dominator. It depends on the items. Like Garen scales better with HP items because he can provide the emissary bonus to his nearby allies. But Garen has the advantage of not needing to try to sustain through fights, and in the late game, Mundo can often be bursted down before he can get like second or third cast off.
yeah, I agree completely. 2 star, each of these 2 star, Garen tends to be a better tank. He's just a really strong unit. Item wise, you're really gonna want Shoujo on Soko. You can use adaptive as like a substitute, but it's gonna be a lot worse. And then you really want one attack speed item. It could be red buff, but ideally it's Nashor's. And then your third item can just be a damage item, or I believe a second Shojin is actually the absolute best thing you can get. But if you can't get that, you can go like Jewel Gauntlet, Giant Slayer, Guard Breaker. Any of these will be fine.
Yeah, you can also go second Ashes if you really have to. Just making sure Soko casts a lot tends to help his damage. He doesn't necessarily need like a pure raw damage item or AP item because of the scaling Dominator bonuses.
Yeah. And then you're of course this is a full AP comp, so you're gonna want Shred somewhere in the comp. So and of course, as with any comp, you're gonna want anti-heal. If you do hit Mordekaiser, or if you're high rolling really hard and you know you can itemize for Mordekaiser, you're gonna want QSS or Edge Knight, or even both. Both are is good, and then plus usually attack speed. So honestly, like he's mostly gonna get your leftover items since you're gonna be itemizing for the carries you're gonna know you have. But like Nashor's is good, just like AP. Quicksilver, of course, will give you attack speed.
I think
Um,
Mordekaiser is like a great way to cap out the board. In the end game, he provides CC like super high damage, and he also tanks a ton because he has inbuilt 40% Omni Vamp. Generally, it's I see some people build healing on Mordekaiser, but generally that is wasted. It's better to just make sure that he has some survivability, through the items listed, or perhaps some extra damage.
yeah, Mordekaiser already has a ton of Omnivamp, so just dealing more damage will heal him for more, so it tends to be better. Also, yeah, Mordekaiser 1, definitely pretty strong. Could be worth itemizing. Jace also fits well on this board, just being Form Swapper was the least. Okay, spent a pretty long time on this one. Let's talk about Emissary next. So again, with Black Rose, I think with it, so Academy can be either AD or AP opener. Black Rose is AP, and then Emissary is kind of your AD opener or Bruiser opener. You can go into Emissaries. So a lot of times this might be something like Conquer plus Watcher, um, something like this, for example. It doesn't have necessarily have to be Conquer. It could be like Artillerist, um, or it could be like a Bruiser opener, even something like a Nocturne Akali, uh, like an opener like this, for example. a lot of these can go into emissaries. If you have like BT, Edge of Night, these kind of item stacks, this can go in your Mbessa. If you have backline items, so again, like I mentioned, if we have, let's say we have Draven 2, so if we have like backline items like something like this, then this could go on Corki. And then this comp is pretty expensive and it's a little tricky because if you don't have all four emissaries, you're not going to be able to play the full board. So I usually don't upgrade the ones I'm not playing on my board, especially Nami in the backline. So if I don't have all the emissaries yet, I won't upgrade a Nami 2 on my bench, just because
Yeah,
I'm not sure I'm gonna play it.
yeah, along the same lines, when I'm trying to play emissary, if you can't fully win streak, oftentimes I look to try to take econ augments. Just guaranteeing you that you can at least play your board because hitting at least one copy of Mbessa and Garen and Tristan and Navi is so much more important than in other comps where you can substitute like in Silco with other dominators. That you kind of need to be really specific and picky, a little bit more picky with at least the core of your board, which means being low econ is sometimes a death sentence.
Yeah. Emissary is interesting. There's a few variations you can play. I made a video a while ago on the form swapper variation, so this is just like Swain, Gameplank, and then a lot of times if you have a strong Ambessa, Quick Striker is a really strong trait. Um, so it could also include Twist of Fate. Gameplank gives Enforcer to Vi. And you see this is 9 units, so you can definitely drop one of these on level 8. If you don't have Corki 2, then you don't need to play him. Otherwise, like you could drop like whoever your weakest unit is.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible in terms of the 80 items you have. You can kind of make use of a lot of 80 items. It also abuses certain item augments. To note, quality over quantity is one of the best augments for the comp, as well as bronze for life.
Yeah, Lucky Gloves as well. If you every single one of these units, even like Tristana with 4 Emissary or Nami with 4 Emissary, every single one of these units is pretty effective with the items. Some other variations you can play. That's probably gonna be like a pretty common one. With Corki, you can go Echo for scrap, and then Scar will give you 2 traits as well. And then this is gonna be really nice if you find Jinx. Jinx will pair with Echo. This is probably less common in my opinion, than the other variation because a lot of times you'll go into Emissary because you have AD items, and then the Echo is not that much value. Another variation you could do is Vladimir for Watch. If you have a strong Garen, you could go like Vladimir for Watcher, and then a lot of times you'll want Corki backline. You just get Artillerist for free with Tristana, and Corki's like you really want a backline carry. Corki just tends to be a really good fit here. And again, we're going to this with AD items. We're shredding armor. We don't want to spend item econ on building, you know, armor shred as well as magic shred. If you find Rumble, I really like Rel and Rumble here to get Sentinel, and then Porky will give you Scrap with Rumble. And of course, Rel will give you Conquer as well. But there's
Yeah,
definitely a few versions you can play. 4 Form Swapper, I've seen people play as well.
yeah. As long as you have the base core 4 units, there's like a lot of decent flex packages that you can play.
Okay. Next, let's talk about. So I would say these are the 3 top comps. Again, with AD openers, you could go towards this AP Black Rose, and then Academy Sentinel. Can kind of be either one, and all 3 of these are gonna probably be the mainline comps. But let's go ahead and talk about the rerolls. Let's go. I guess the best reroll is probably Renata. So basically, you really want Singe 3 just because his durability scales really well with Sentinel's magic resist and armor, and just his ability is insane for any unit. This ability has not like existed in several sets of like TFT because they thought it was too powerful, but they brought it back on a 1 cost, and yeah, he's just really strong. But normally you'll stay level 4, roll for your Singe 3, or stay level 5, roll for Singe 3, and then once you have him, go for Renata 3 after. You can Sentinel and Visionary both go up in two at a time. So you can go like more of whatever you're hitting more. You can go like two Sentinel, four Visionary, or the other way around, and then you can go 4-4 or 6-2. I if you do go 6-2, I would go six Sentinels. You're always playing Rel because she's one of each, and then from here on, like this is your level 5 board, right? So your next thing could be a Sentinel or Visionary. Like if you have Morgana 3, maybe you play her. Otherwise, maybe you play Sentinel.
Yeah, I personally like to go for either Vex or Morgana 3. The other Sentinels you can roll for are either very expensive, or just don't really offer that much at 3 stars, like Irelia.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
whereas whereas like one of Vex or Morgana is pretty relatively cheap. It only costs 9 gold and can hold a lot of leftover items very well.
Yeah, I think having a second damage carry, if possible, is really helpful as well for this comp. Just because, like, Renata, this is very much a stall comp. You really want Archangel and Shojin. Because this is a reroll comp, making sure that your main carry, Renata, has, like, kind of best in slot items is a lot more important than these other comps, like Emissaries, where, all your units on your board are contributing a lot. On this one, you're really focusing a lot of power in here, so you really want Shojin and Archangel. Your next item, Nasher is going to be really good, but if you can't get that, second Archangel, second Shojin, or like red buff are going to be okay.
Yeah, like red buff, Shiv, anything.
Yeah. If you
Uh,
have Stoneplate, you can solo frontline like this. Otherwise, I think like positioning something along these lines. It doesn't have to be like exactly like this, but basically your Renata will kind of shield your entire front line. Your and enemy board will wrap around. Renata shields everything, and your backline being close will also get shielded, and that could definitely make a difference later on in the fight, or just protect these units. And
yeah,
then
one notable augment that people often play this with is Starry Knights. It really helps you hit your low cost 1 stars while rolling on 5 or 6.
yeah, Steadfast is going to be really good. If you do have Stoneplate, even with Sentinels, like Stoneplate is still going to be pretty valuable. Just because Renata shields, so every bit of like durability and magic resist makes that shield more valuable compared to something like Warmogs, which is definitely not bad by any means, but it will not scale with like the Renata casting a lot with Singed giving Renata attack speed and just her casting a lot. And yeah, having a secondary carry is pretty nice. Vex will eventually, once you find a Lowy, you don't have to worry about this too much because this is kind of late in the game, but you will get Rebel in for free. Um, if you have a strong Vex, and which is kind of nice. Okay. Uh, let's talk about Nocturne.
Mhm.
So,
Nocturne's been pretty terrorizing in the past few weeks. Specifically, ranged Nocturne is incredibly strong. He does incredible amounts of damage, and when he's allowed to do it from safety, Nocturne 1 or Nocturne 2 or even Nocturne 1 can be like a free streak through the mid game, and a menace even late game. Specifically, I'm talking about Ornn artifacts such as Fishbones, Sniper's Focus, RC. But even without that, I believe that Nocturne is a playable comp without it. Especially if you hit something like Quick Striker +1, or if you're high rolling Automata +1. Um, Nocturne can just be one of the few reroll comps that are available because there's not that many reroll comps that are available in the meta currently, and he's playable as a strong default, but really try to look for artifacts that let him extend his range.
yeah. There's also Sniper +1. If you get that, you can play. Since you have a Kog'Maw, you actually get a little bit of value. It's not nearly as good as the artifacts because the base stats that the sniper trait gives you is not as good. Um, but yeah, if I get like even offered any of these three items between Fishbones, Rapid Fire Cannon, and um, Sniper's Focus from Portable Forge on 2-1, even with zero Nocturnes, regardless of what else I get offered, I mean, maybe something that's like really strong on my board if I get like Trench Coat or something.
I'll take
But
Sniper's Focus.
generally, yeah, generally if I get offered one of these, even with zero Nocturnes, I'm generally like thinking about Nocturne like pretty heavily, especially if it's not contested. If you don't have one of these, if you do have one of these, you can go full damage, just like the extra range. Note that snipers is actually two range, so you can put him back here, whereas some of the other ones you'll want him up here, otherwise he'll have to walk. If you do have snipers, then you don't really need healing. Quicksilver is still going to be good, just because it kind of scales into the late game as well. It gives you a lot of stats. I think a lot of people don't realize how much stats it gives you for the first 18 seconds. And because this is like a high damage comp, fights usually don't go longer than that. So Quicksilver is part defensive item, but it actually gives you quite a lot of damage as well. So this is going to be good. And then you're going to want usually like an AD item because Quick Strikers get a lot of attack speed. So it could be like Infinity Edge, Deathblade, Giant Slayer.
Hmm.
If you
Yeah.
don't
If you want,
have range, you need healing. And then usually you're going to want Titans as well. Something like this.
I actually think I might be better here. He still needs to do a reasonable amount of damage. A lot of his damage is spell damage from the bleed, and also he gains a reasonable amount of resistances from just playing vertical automata.
Okay.
But yeah, I think Titans is a reasonable item. A defensive option like Eon is also okay, but I do think he does need to have the damage.
Yeah. Um, this is gonna be kind of like the main line. If you're really high rolling your nocturnes and you hit pretty fast and you don't have these, you can actually drop the automata units for emissaries as well. A lot of times the value of playing this board is if you can hit Blitzcrank 3, that's gonna be a really strong unit. But otherwise, like you're gonna play this in the mid game, and then you can drop these two units for emissary. Amumu can stay to give Watcher to Garen.
Yeah, that
Um,
said, if you do hit Automata +1, it can be incredibly high cap. Malzahar with 6 Automata, quite good. And specifically as a call out, Mel with 6 Automata is one of the best Automata holders in the entire game.
yeah. I tend to not go for a Kog'Maw or a Kali. I think they're both pretty expensive, and a Kali is kind of just like a weaker unit. And then Kog'Maw is kind of the opposite of this comp. Kog'Maw is a scaling unit. He does well in long fights, and these fights with Nocturne tend to be on the shorter side. So if I do have extra items, I usually end up itemizing Twisted Fate, uh, holding like anti-heal, Shojin, or just like any generic AP items.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
the most important unit in the comp is definitely just Nocturne, and other stuff depends on what you have offered.
Yeah. You do want to get 4 Quick Striker. Of course, like you might not find Ambessa for a while, so this would usually be your board on level 6. And then, yeah. Okay, let's briefly talk about Tristana next. So Infinity Edge is pretty important. You really want her to get kills with her ultimate. She's infinitely scaling, so having a good opener for this is pretty important. So your Tristana can get stacks. Rageblade does pretty well. A lot of times you're going to want her to go into the fight, and Rageblade kind of synergizes with Gunblade as well. It doesn't have to be these items exactly. I would say Infinity Edge is the most important of the three. You can go like just damage items like this, but generally Rageblade +1 could be like Last Whisper as well. And then
Yeah, I wouldn't consider Tristana from a spot where you can't get Rageblade or IE very soon. You really do need to have her itemized, and she needs to be the primary damage dealer on your team for her to get stacks. One small thing is that you can be so you can play a board like this, and it's quite good with the too much value augments, which gets you more rerolls based on the number 2 cost on your board. Also in the early game, you can play Tristana. There is a specific Tristana positioning to help you farm 2 stacks of her stacking AD against neutrals.
yeah, I put that in other TFT resources in the Discord, so you can see that here. But yeah, this will kind of be like probably your level 6 4. It could be Urgot. You do want to 3-star one of these frontliners if possible. And then on level 8, you'll just go for Artillerist. Is kind of like the standard. Pretty simple comp 4-4.
Yep. If you do high roll Tristanas specifically though, like if you just have a lot of Tristanas and you decide to play Tristana because maybe you started with a Tristana 2 plus Nico, Um, another cap of the board can just be to play for Emissary, with either 4 Artillerist or some more frontline or just other utility units.
Yep. I
Tristana
actually,
fits in the Emissary board quite well because she is an Emissary unit. She gets the damage bonuses, all the other bonuses,
yeah. Rain and
etc.
I just played a game where she was watching me, and I hit Tristan 3 really early, so I decided to just play the emissary board here.
I think I played this like basically the same game yesterday as well.
Yeah. Okay. Next, let's talk about Urgot. Urgot, a lot of time. So basically, in this comp, your Tristan is not getting that many kills, so she's not going to be that important. I would still consider going for Tristan 3. You're gonna want healing on Urgot. Titans is gonna be really good, and then your last item can be a little bit flexible. A lot of people like Quicksilver. I think Quicksilver is definitely good. I think it's a little bit overrated. You could go like Sterix, second Titans, or just like an AD item. Um, and then you're gonna want to play 3 Experiment. Urgot's Experiment bonus for himself is extremely strong. And then Gameplank tends to be a good pit fighter because you'll also get scrap with Corky. And then yeah, you'll want to play 4 Artillerist. So a board kind of like this, you'll get Experiment. How many? There's 7 units. So a lot. I think Gangplank Pit
Uh,
Fighter is probably the least important. So
usually you play Elise, and that's
yeah,
part of
yeah,
why you play Game Freak here.
yeah. So this will kind of be like your front line, these 2 units, and then I would say Gangplank's the least important, even though he's all 3 traits. Pit Fighter, 2 Pit Fighter is like not bad by any means, but it's not mandatory.
I
It just depends what you hit, honestly.
I kind of value the Pit Fighter a lot because it's 15% Omnivamp for Urgots.
Yeah, you could play over like one of the artillerists on 7, and then eventually like play this board on 8 as well.
Hmm?
Um, Experiment wise, normally I think it's just Urgot and Nunu. Because you're rerolling this comp, a lot of times you will want to go for Nunu 3 as well as Urgot 3, and then you can go for Triss. It's kind of just depending on what you hit.
Yeah, I'm not personally like super familiar with the comp, but I know that it does super well with the Sterix augment, Unleash the Beast. It gives you a decent amount of CC immunity without needing to necessarily compromise too much of your damage. Um, there was the old version of this with Hunger for Power sets. It's not necessarily forcible anymore, so people don't tend to go for it. But if you do have a spare Deathwid lying around somewhere somehow, you could eat like one of your Artillerists or Gangplank.
Yeah. Hunger for Power is definitely still good on Urgot. I wouldn't like go for it because, as Rain said, it's a little too expensive to be able to like play towards it. But if you do, if it's like the first couple anomalies you hit, I think I would definitely take it. And yeah, you could just like eat a game plank or something, or even like a Tristana.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, I would say we've already covered like kind of all of like the best comps. So let's just talk about some other ones real fast. Family, I think Family's been around forever, so I think this one we can kind of just go through pretty quickly. It's Violet. I mean, the entire comp basically is a lot weaker than it was in kind of its prime. Um, but it's definitely still playable, especially if you have like Trenchcoat is going to be really good. And Violet can use actually quite a few artifacts pretty well. She can use like Silver Mirror, like Death Defiant, and I think she does okay with like plus range, but I'm not that sure about it.
She has okay. I've seen Spectral do well on her
Oh
Spectral
yeah,
Cutlass.
yeah, maybe like Prowler's Claw as well.
Hmm. Yeah, she can use the melee ones because the melee ones are just tend to be like reasonably strong.
Yeah. But yeah, I have a pretty detailed guide on this. I think that like pretty much everything is mostly the same. They did nerf her ability, so Infinity Edge is I believe when I made my guide, Infinity Edge was pre-nerf, so it was a lot more valuable. Now like BT Titans is kind of like the preferred build. And then your third
Like
item could be like Quicksilver. Doesn't have to be exactly this. Could be like Sterix, second Titans, just damage.
I do think that this comp is harder to play now. Oftentimes you fall behind tempo and without like an order artifact or family plus one. you start losing fights on stage 4 and 5 that you wouldn't have otherwise. But definitely it's still playable. Definitely is still a comp you can look for, but I don't think it's very forcible anymore.
Yep. Okay, so we covered again like our three top comps: Academy Sentinel, Black Rose Silco, and Emissary. We covered some rerolls. Now, I want just very quickly talk about like some like I guess like B plus, A minus to like B tier comps. I think like the best of these is probably like Rebels. Um, Rebel is pretty straightforward comp. I made a guide on this really recently. Honestly, just check that out. But eventually, you normally start off with AP opener, um, and you end up relying on Zoe for kind of your stage four. But to cap out, you really want to rely on Jinx, casting as soon as possible to kind of like one shot the enemy board. You really want to give her Ambusher. And then you really want to play 7 Rebel. The 5 Rebel breakpoint is like not that good, but 7 gives you that team wide stun, so 7 is really, really good. And then,
It's just to discuss the comp. I've played the comp a fair bit amount. And I think one of the best indications for the comp is just having like an early Lux 2 with Rageblade. Um, like I specifically mentioned Lux with Rageblade because Rageblade is one of Zoe's better items. She can skip a mana item with Rageblade. Benefits from the burst of attack speed that 7 Rebel gets, and she gets to scale up pretty fast with a low cast time. And Rageblade Lux is just one of the strongest unit item combos in the early game. And it allows you to continue building AP, whereas the other Rageblade comp, Twitch, would require you to build AD.
yep. Yeah, Zoe, out of all like the casters, she has the shortest cast time, which normally like prevents units like Heimerdinger from stacking Rageblade because he spends so much of his time shooting rockets. Zoe's cast comes out really fast, so she can stack Rageblade almost as fast as, or even faster than a lot of AD champions. I guess speaking of Twitch, let's talk about that one next. I guess like the default Twitch board, if you don't have anything, you can play 5 Experiment. You can also play Black Rose with like 3 Experiment, with just like dropping these two. But a lot of you're definitely gonna want Sniper. Sniper is extremely strong trait, so oftentimes you'll get Pit Fighter and Enforcer for free. Maddie will directly upgrade into Caitlyn, and then oftentimes you're gonna want just like another Bruiser or something
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah, there's
frontline.
quite a few ways to cap out the board. You can drop a few of these units. You could play like stuff like Mordekaiser. You could drop Desire Urgot. I will mention that this comp is by default isn't necessarily super strong, but it becomes one of the A tier or S tier comps when you can get the collector on Twitch, when you can get bronze for life, in which case you would drop the 5 experiment. Generally, you would tend to play stuff like GP plus some other units to fill out your traits. Um, when you get the experiment plus 1, and you can hit you can ex- you can duplicate your experiment units because just having 2 Windows 2 is a incredibly large amount of frontline. And also the red buff augment is one that doesn't get mentioned a lot, but Twitch really applies red buff really well, and he kind of bleeds the backline to death.
Yeah. Um, yeah, Rage Play's gonna be really good on Twitch. This guy, we talked about Zoe having a short cast. This guy basically never stops attacking. In fact, his ultimate gives him more attack speed, which helps him stack Rage Blade. Infinity Edge is gonna be really good. His ult can't crit without it. And then, um, yeah, with Sniper, damage amp is a little less valuable, but it's still gonna be okay. So you'd rather have a AD, and as always, haven't been talking about this for too much of the other costs, but if you're dealing physical damage, you're gonna want Armor Shred, and you want anti heal in every comp. Twitch, as Ray mentions, can spread red buff really well. A few other lines that I think probably don't want to talk. I probably don't really want to talk about in too much detail, but just so you're aware, like Enforcer, potential line you can play. If you have Conquer +1, um, I actually like to play 4 Emissary +6 Conquer on level 8 with Conquer +1, but it doesn't have to be exactly that. It's kind of like a snowball comp where if you can keep winning in stage 4, then eventually you reach that like 440 cash out that gives you a Thief's Gloves. Before then, you'll get a 2-star 5 cost, which may or may not be useful. But once you get that Thief's Gloves, at that point on, you're gonna start getting permanent board strength. And then if you can kind of survive that long, you should like snowball into potentially a first. Scrap has kind of fallen out of favor. Corki is extremely contested. Sentinel Academy players are taking him. Emissary players are taking him. Like we mentioned, those are kind of the main comps. Even like the Tristana and Urgot rerollers are both taking him as well. And this comp used to kind of rely on hitting Corki 2 as your main carry, so it's a lot weaker now. Um, and then the last two comps we'll talk about, Lone Hero Lux, I made a video on that recently, so if you get offered Lone Hero on 2-1, that's something you can play for. And then lastly, Chem Baron, which I made a video on recently.
Yeah, those are the two actual S tiers of the patch. With Lone Hero Lux, it doesn't actually always go first, but it's really, really, really hard to bot for unless you're like seriously contested and you seriously miss on items. Chem Baron is just the highest cap comp in the game. If you can get even like a 300 cash out, like 300 to 500 cash outs are all good. 500 is generally an insta win with very few exceptions. 400 tends to give you a ton of board strength that like lets you push for a win, in 300 like it's if you can cash out with a decent amount of extra HP, it's just some extra items that you can toss on either Rennie or Silco, especially since Rennie is actually quite a good unit at the game.
Yep. All right. So this is a pretty long video. But yeah, this is we've been playing this patch for a couple weeks now, and we got a couple more weeks of it. So I think we have like a pretty good grasp on the meta, and hopefully you guys can find good use of this for the next 2 weeks. Thanks for joining me, Rain, and thank you guys for watching.
Happy New Year.